May I play in exchange for food?" They laughed at the poor girl without knowing she was the daughter of a legendary pianist. Don't forget to comment from which country you are watching us. That night, in a mansion illuminated by crystal chandeliers, a millionaire known for his passion for music had gathered politicians, businessmen, and artists. While glasses of wine were raised in toasts and laughter echoed, an 8-year-old girl stood, silently, hiding behind the doors of the grand hall. She had entered holding her mother's hand, a waitress who had begged her boss to let her bring her daughter, because she had no one else to leave her with. No one expected that this little girl, dressed in simple clothes and with eyes heavy with hunger, would change the course of that evening. While the guests enjoyed canapes and talked about business, the girl stayed apart, staring in fascination at the grand piano that dominated the center of the room. She did not look away, as if the instrument itself were speaking to her in silence. Her stomach growled, and though she tried to ignore the hunger, the aromas of food surrounded her cruelly. Her mother, carrying a tray in her hands, glanced at her from the corner of her eye, wishing she could give her something, but she was trapped between the pressure of work and the fear of losing her job. The girl then took a deep breath, and with unexpected courage walked through the crowd until she stopped in front of the piano. The owner of the mansion, a man with gray hair who enjoyed showing off his skills on the keys, looked at her in confusion. Murmurs began among the guests, who saw the scene as a grotesque interruption to the elegance of the night. The girl, in a low but firm voice, asked, "May I play in exchange for food?" The hall burst into laughter, and some commented with irony that the little one just wanted to be the star of a circus. Her mother, ashamed and with tears in her eyes, tried to rush forward to stop her, but the air inside the grand hall grew heavy, almost suffocating. Every eye was fixed on the little girl, perched on the piano bench as though the weight of the entire room rested on her small shoulders. Some leaned forward, whispering, waiting for the inevitable mistake that would justify their laughter. Others crossed their arms, certain the child would strike a few random keys before being escorted out in shame. The millionaire sat back in his chair, arms folded, a smug smile tugging at his lips. To him, this was nothing but a moment of amusement, a story his guests would retell later with a laugh about the poor girl who dared to dream too high. Her mother's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to rush forward and pull her daughter away before she humiliated herself further, but something inside her froze. In the child's posture, straight, focused, unshaken, there was a quiet defiance she had seen before. It was the same look her late husband once wore when he sat at his old, battered piano, coaxing beauty out of broken keys. She remembered those nights vividly, the flickering light of a single candle, her husband's hands guiding the tiny fingers of their daughter across ivory keys that barely worked. "Even if I am gone," he used to whisper, "she will still hear the music?" That memory burned in her chest, and suddenly she could not move. Around them, the whispers sharpened. "This is ridiculous. Take her down. She probably knows only one nursery tune. She just wants attention." The millionaire raised his voice, cutting through the murmurs. "Come on, little one. Show us what you have." The girl closed her eyes. For a brief moment, the world seemed to disappear. The glittering chandeliers, the mocking faces, even her mother's worried gaze. All that remained was the piano beneath her fingers and the memory of her father's voice. Then, her hands moved. The first notes rang out, pure and steady, slicing through the silence like a blade of light. The melody swelled, filling every corner of the mansion. Each note shimmered like glass, fragile yet unbreakable, carrying emotions too vast for a child to comprehend, or so the guests thought. But this little girl was not just playing. She was speaking through the piano, telling a story no words could capture. The mocking faces around the room had changed. The smirks were gone, replaced by parted lips and stunned silence. For the first time that evening, not a single glass clinked, not a single whisper dared to rise above the music. Even the servants in the back froze, trays trembling in their hands, caught in the spell of her playing. Her mother stood in the corner, hands covering her mouth. Tears blurred her vision as she realized what was happening. This was not random talent. This was legacy. This was the very gift her late husband had left behind, alive in their daughter's fragile hands. The girl's small body swayed gently with the rhythm, her eyes still closed as though she was being guided by something greater than herself. To her, the grand piano wasn't foreign or intimidating. It was home. The millionaire leaned forward, his elbows pressing into the table. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced by unease. Every chord struck him with a force he could not explain. His chest tightened as memories he thought buried forever surged to the surface. He had heard this before. Decades earlier, in another hall, in another lifetime, a man had played these same notes, a man whose music had once brought him to tears, a man he had admired like no other, but that man was gone. Dead for years, and yet, here it was again. The same passion, the same touch, the same voice of the piano. The millionaire's hand trembled as he gripped the edge of his chair. He whispered under his breath, too low for anyone to hear. Impossible. The guests, sensing something monumental, leaned in, their earlier arrogance swallowed by awe. The air seemed to vibrate with the weight of. The mansion had never been this quiet. Not even during its most solemn gatherings. Every person in the room seemed to be holding their breath, afraid that even the smallest sound might shatter the fragile miracle unfolding before them. The girl's fingers glided across the ivory keys with grace far beyond her years. Each note told a story of loss, of hunger, of hope buried deep but still alive. It was as if the piano itself had been waiting for her, aching to be touched by hands that carried such truth. Her mother's tears flowed freely now. She no longer cared about hiding them. The sight of her daughter, so small, so brave, commanding the attention of the most powerful people in the room, filled her with both pride and fear. Pride because she knew her husband's spirit lived on through their child. Fear because she also knew how cruel the world could be, and she had no idea what these people would do once the music stopped. The guests, who only minutes earlier had laughed at the idea of a starving girl daring to touch the piano, now sat spellbound. Some covered their mouths, others stared wide-eyed, as if they had been transported into another world. A few even lowered their heads, ashamed of their earlier cruelty, but no one was more shaken than the millionaire himself. His mind raced, fragments of memory colliding violently. He could see the face of the pianist he once idolized, a man whose music had defined his youth. He could remember sitting in another hall years ago, wine in hand, listening to those same melodies. Back then, he thought he was untouchable, that money and power were everything. But that night, that man's music had humbled him, even made him weep. And now, tonight, decades later, here it was again. Not an imitation, not a child mimicking notes. It was the same soul, the same fire. The millionaire's throat tightened. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He wanted to dismiss it, to tell himself it was impossible, but every fibe. The silence after the music was deafening. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had stopped inside the glittering mansion. The chandeliers still glowed, the wine still shimmered in crystal glasses, but none of it mattered anymore. Every soul in the room was trapped in the memory of the sound they had just heard. The little girl kept her hands resting on the keys, as if afraid that lifting them would break the spell. She looked directly at the millionaire, her steady gaze cutting through the heavy air. There was no arrogance in her eyes, no begging, only the quiet dignity of someone who knew her worth, even if the world tried to deny it. Her mother, trembling, finally lowered her hands from her face. Her cheeks were wet with tears and her knees felt weak. She wanted to run to her daughter, to shield her from whatever came next. But she could not move. Deep inside, she sensed. This was bigger than either of them. The millionaire rose suddenly from his chair. The force of his movement startled everyone, and the glass of wine at his side toppled, shattering on the marble floor. Gasps rippled through the hall, but no one dared to speak. His footsteps echoed as he approached the piano. Each step carried the weight of decades of memories crashing down on him. He stopped just a few feet away from the girl, his face pale, his jaw trembling. "Where His voice broke, forcing him to pause. He cleared his throat and tried again, softer this time. Where did you learn to play like that? The girl's answer was simple, but it pierced him like a blade. My father taught me before he died. He said that one day someone would truly listen to my music. The millionaire's eyes widened. His chest tightened painfully. He whispered a name, one he had not spoken in years. The name of the pianist who once changed his life, the man whose music he had carried in his soul ever since. At the sound of that name, the mother gasped, her tray slipping from her trembling hands, and the hall trembled with silence, as though the walls themselves were waiting for the next word. The millionaire stood frozen before the little girl, her eyes so steady, so piercing, holding him captive in a way no man or fortune ever had. Her mother, shaken, whispered the name he had spoken just moments earlier, her voice cracked with disbelief, but the sound confirmed what everyone in the room already suspected. The guests exchanged glances, their once mocking expressions now replaced by awe and unease. Some shifted in their seats, whispering fragments of questions they didn't dare finish. Others leaned forward, their eyes gleaming with the hunger of people witnessing a secret unravel before them. The millionaire's lips trembled. Your father, he whispered, his voice breaking. Tell me his name. ... The girl blinked, her small chest rising and falling as though the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. She hesitated, not out of fear, but because she knew the truth would change everything. Finally, she spoke. His name was Daniel Parker. ... The room gasped as if the very air had been ripped away. Daniel Parker. A name carved into history, a man whose genius at the piano had touched hearts across continents. A man who had vanished from the world too soon, leaving only silence in his wake. The millionaire staggered back, gripping the edge of the piano as though he might collapse. His eyes glistened and his breath came in ragged bursts. Memories of Daniel flooded him, his laughter, his brilliance, the night he swore he'd never forget his music. And now, here before him, was Daniel's daughter. The girl's mother finally stepped forward, her voice breaking as she addressed the room. Yes, Daniel was my husband. He died with nothing, and I have struggled every day to keep our child alive. But his gift lives on in her. ... Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the stunned guests. And tonight you've all heard it. For the first time in years, the millionaire's chest rose and fell unevenly, as if each breath carried the weight of years of regret. His hands, once steady with the confidence of power, now trembled openly in front of everyone. The guests, frozen in silence, watched a man they thought untouchable unravel before their eyes. They had seen him crush rivals, silence critics, and mock the poor without hesitation, but now, before a starving child and her widowed mother, he looked smaller than he ever had. He lifted his head slowly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time in decades, his voice carried no authority, no pride, only pain. I knew him, he whispered hoarsely. I knew Daniel Parker. He wasn't just a musician to me. He was my friend. The only man whose music ever made me feel human. Gasps echoed through the hall. The revelation struck like thunder. The servants stared wide-eyed, the guests leaned closer, and the mother clutched her chest, stunned. The little girl tilted her head, studying him carefully. If you knew my father, she asked softly, why did you laugh at me? ... The words pierced deeper than any accusation. The millionaire winced, lowering his gaze in shame. His voice cracked. Because I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid of seeing him again in you. Afraid of remembering what I had lost. Money, power. All of it is meaningless compared to what your father gave me. And I threw it away. ... The room grew colder, heavier. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim as the truth settled in. Her mother finally found her voice, trembling but steady enough to be heard. All we ever asked for was kindness. Food for a child, you had everything and we had nothing. Yet her voice broke, you turned our hunger into a game. The millionaire closed his eyes, her words cutting deeper than any blade. When he opened them again, tears streamed freely down his face. Slowly, shakily, he sank to his knees before the little girl. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. A man who had. The millionaire remained on his knees, his once proud frame trembling as though the weight of all his sins had finally caught up with him. The great hall, once filled with arrogance and wealth, now felt like a sanctuary where something sacred had been revealed. No one moved. No one dared to break the fragile silence. The guests, who had come to mock and feast, now sat as witnesses to a moment they would never forget. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others wiped tears they never thought they would shed in this man's house. The little girl slid off the piano bench and stood before him. Her small figure looked impossibly fragile against the towering man, yet somehow she seemed taller, stronger. She was the one commanding the room now. The millionaire lifted his tear-streaked face, searching her eyes for something, mercy, perhaps, or redemption. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I cannot undo what I've done. I cannot bring your father back, but if there is any way at all, let me honor him through you." Her mother gasped softly, her heart caught between hope and fear. For years she had endured hunger, humiliation, and despair. Could this truly be happening? Or was it another cruel game? The girl's steady gaze softened, just slightly. "Honor him," she said quietly, "not with words, but with actions. My father believed music was a gift to be shared, not locked away for the rich. If you truly knew him, then you know what you must do." The millionaire lowered his head again, her words striking deep. He had spent a lifetime building walls of gold and stone, keeping beauty for himself and his kind. And now, a starving child was tearing those walls down with nothing but honesty and truth. A murmur rose among the guests. They, too, were waiting to see what the most powerful man among them would choose. Would he dismiss this moment as weakness? Would he retreat into pride? Or would he finally listen to Daniel Parker's daughter, to the music that had once? The air inside the grand hall had changed. The scent of wine and perfume was still there, but now it was mixed with something far more powerful, hope. The millionaire stood tall, though his hands were still trembling. He turned to the servants and spoke with a command none of them had ever heard before. "Bring food," he said. "Not on trays, not in corners. Set it here at the main table." The crowd gasped again. The main table was sacred, reserved only for the wealthiest and most important. Yet the servants hurried, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Plates of roasted meats, fresh bread, and golden fruits soon covered the polished table. Steam rose in the air, filling the room with warmth. The girl's stomach growled again, louder this time, and for once, no one laughed. The millionaire stepped aside, gesturing with his hand. "Eat," he told her gently. "This food is not charity, it is your right, double quotes, Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She hesitated, her heart torn between gratitude and fear of insult. But the girl, with quiet dignity, took her seat at the head of the table. She picked up a piece of bread, holding it carefully, almost reverently, before taking her first bite. The hall remained silent. Every eye was on her, and with every bite she took, the pride and cruelty of the guests seemed to crumble into dust. The mother finally sat down beside her daughter, her trembling hands folding together as if in prayer. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of survival lift just a little. The millionaire did not sit. He stood behind the girl, his face solemn but softened, watching as if he were guarding something precious. One of the guests finally broke the silence. "Is this truly happening?" he whispered to another. "He's sharing his table with them." The millionaire turned sharply toward the man. His eyes burned with a truth that silenced any further protest. "Yes," he said firmly. "And if any of you cannot respect this child, this—" The little girl finished her meal slowly, each bite tasting like a victory she could barely believe. Her mother sat beside her, silent tears streaming down her face. Though now they were tears of relief, not shame, the millionaire remained standing, his eyes fixed on the child as though afraid that if he blinked, she might vanish. He had built empires, bought loyalties, and crushed rivals, but never in his life had he felt so small, and never had he felt so alive. When the girl finally set down the last piece of bread, she turned her gaze to him. Her eyes, bright, unyielding, seemed to carry the weight of her father's soul. "My papa said," she whispered, her voice steady, "that music is truth. You cannot hide from it. It tells the world who you really are." The millionaire's chest tightened. He nodded slowly, his voice trembling as he replied, "And tonight? Your music told me who I should have been all along." The hall erupted, not in laughter, not in polite applause, but in something deeper. The guests rose to their feet, clapping with genuine respect, some even wiping their own tears. The chandeliers above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if the very house was alive with new spirit. The millionaire stepped forward, lowering himself once more to the girl's height. He took her hand in both of his and said with solemn clarity, "You have given me more than I can ever repay. From this day forward, you will not be a guest in my house. You will be family. My home is your home. My wealth, my name, my protection, all of it is yours. Double quotes. The mother gasped, covering her mouth. "Sir, we cannot. But he silenced her gently. "No, this is not charity. This is destiny. Your husband gave me music. Your daughter has given me life. The least I can give in return is everything." The hall stood frozen, hearts pounding at the magnitude of his words. For the first time, the most powerful man in the room was not the millionaire. It was the little girl who had walked in hungry and left W.